Hey everyone, welcome back to ASM Track Tips. My name is Tom O'Gorman, and today we're talking about one of the most iconic road courses in the world, Laguna Seca. It's 2.2 miles, 11 corners in Monterrey, California. It's actually a surprisingly low grip surface. It gets really dusty, and in general, it drives slower than you would want it to all the time because of that grip available. And I don't know that there's a sports car enthusiast that doesn't know what Laguna Seca is between all the video games and being a bucket list track for most people. But there's a lot more nuance to it than just the corkscrew that everybody knows about. So let's jump in and take a lap. So here we have our overhead map of Laguna Seca. I think it's a layout most people are familiar with, but before we jump into specific tips, there are two notes to Laguna Seca that I would make as a note in whole. First of all, the curbs all the way around the track are very usable. They're very friendly, so feel free to use as much of them as possible. In most parts, they're not ever going to upset the car. And the second note is that the surface here at Laguna Seca is extremely low grip. There's just not a lot of grip available due to the aggregate in the pavement and also due to the amount of dust that tends to be around the track, especially as cars maybe go off a little bit and bring that dust back on. So even though this track may feel like it should have some good flow and some good speed, a lot of the times you have to go slower than you think because of the grip available just in general. So here's starting our lap on the front straightaway. It's the longest straightaway on the track as well, but right around the start-finish line here, it starts to climb uphill and bend off to the left. And right before turn one is a big crest that you're going to go over before you can see down into turn two, which is the actual first corner. But right here at turn one, most cars can cling to the inside wall. You'll kind of apex the end of the pit wall here and then come over the crest pretty easily, guiding the car on the left side of the track. I would recommend if you're in a higher horsepower car, especially if you're not on track tires or have extra downforce, you may want to stick the car in the middle of the track and angle it more towards the apex of that crest or the top of that crest, rather than clinging to the left side of the track here. The car will tend to go light right around here, and that will help move the car off to the right side of the track, but if you haven't planned for it, it can be a bit of a surprise because turn one becomes an actual turn in some of those faster cars. Now once we've cleared turn one, over this crest, we're actually going significantly downhill. TV and even in-car video doesn't do it justice for how downhill this braking zone is into turn two, the Andretti hairpin. So the key here is not over-braking the car, not charging the corner too much, and making sure that you get the car slowed down to actually maximize the corner, because you can easily fall into the trap of braking too deep and trying to charge into the hairpin too much. That's just going to put you wide and hang you early in the lap. Having let the car float off to the right side of the track through turn one, you're going to brake again earlier than you probably think, somewhere around the beginning of the curb here, or the three board is where most cars have to start, or even before. But turn two drives very much like a double apex corner in most cars. You're going to want to have the car on the right side of the track, and right down here towards around the one board, pretty early, you're going to want to turn in and angle the car slowly towards this first inside curb right here. It's okay to let the car kind of drive past it just a little bit, and almost turn the corner more into a V. As you come off the brakes, having apexed early, the car should rotate nicely and pivot towards the second apex and then down to that second apex as well, then feeding power to get off the corner. Now in some slow cars, and I mean really slow, like under 200 horsepower, even 100 horsepower cars, may do better with a late turn in and late apex, where you can carry a little bit more speed. But in general, most cars are going to be pretty happy with an early apex and then squaring the corner off for a late apex again. That's going to straighten out your braking zone while still not sacrificing your mid-corner or exit. So as we're finishing turn two, accelerating off the corner, again, clipping the apex at the curb here, and then using all the curb on the exit as well if you need. Then you don't have a lot of time to get the car back to the left for turn three. And in general, turn three and four, which were added in the late 80s to allow motorcycles to race here. Fun fact, the original track went straight from here to here. These corners are completely flat and they drive a little bit slower than you'd want them to. So you're really just trying to get through turns three and four rather than maximizing and attacking. So having come off of turn two, getting over to the left, there's usually a 3, 2, 1 brake marker here. You're going to want to drive straight to the three as early as possible, getting the car set up before your braking zone for turn three. And take note that turn three is more than 90 degrees if you're coming at it from kind of the outside of turn two. So this corner is pretty slow, and again, no elevation to help you. You're going to turn in pretty early and use all the inside curb at the apex of turn three down to the big yellow anti-cut curb that's on the inside there. You want to get right up next to that and then float the car to the outside using all the curb on exit as well. But again, turn three, you're going to turn in earlier than you think and try to roll that speed as you're coming through. Lastly, here in turn three, before the corner, Typically, you're going to want to use a lighter brake pressure rather than a heavy brake pressure to allow the car to stay composed and really float into turn 3 and 4 both, rather than charging in, braking hard, and trying to turn for either of these corners. Again, turn 4 is very similar. Both of these corners drive similarly, but turn 4 from overhead you can see is less than 90 degrees, so it's much faster. And the idea here again is to just kind of turn in a nice central apex right up to that anti-cut curb using all the apex curb and all the track out curb. I don't know that there's much nuance to turns 3 and 4. Again, they don't really make the lap, but you got to get through them to get to the fun stuff later in the lap. The only trick that I have found helps with turn 4 is to make sure that you're rolling off the brakes as you come into the corner. I don't think much either charging and trying to brake hard or trying to trail brake really helps. Just get your braking done right before turn in and then float the car in, maybe even using a little bit of maintenance throttle to help compose the car through turn 4 rather than doing anything tricky with your driving technique. Now we're getting into the fun stuff. Coming off of turn 4, you have one of the longer straightaways on the track. You can see it's almost equivalent to the front straightaway, so this is a really critical exit point from turn 4. You're going to be all the way on the left side of the track, and you can just kind of gradually bring the car across the track here to the right where you want the car set up for turn 5. Now right about here is a pedestrian bridge where people can walk across, and that's a great reference point for braking. Right at that bridge usually is the 3 and then the 2 and the 1. Using that bridge as a reference point, kind of crossing underneath it on the right side of the track towards the 1 board is where you're going to want to start to turn in. And the elevation starts to kick in here at turn 5. The closer you get to the apex, the more there is camber, and it actually gains elevation and camber down to this apex before you climb significantly uphill towards turn 6. So you can really use that entry camber and entry elevation to your advantage by turning in a little bit early, really trail braking or coasting the car into the corner and letting that elevation and camber catch you. You're going to want to hook that apex right against the anti-cut curb, and actually the tighter you stay on exit, the more that camber helps. And what I've found is for most cars, it's actually helpful to kind of give this car just a little bit more of a breather at the apex and power off straight rather than trying to roll as much speed as possible and tracking out early, because that camber will help you just that little bit more. So unless you're in a really momentum driven car where you have to get on power and roll all the way out early, try to give the car just a little bit more of a beat in the middle of the corner to rotate that last little bit, utilize all that camber and elevation, and then get a nice clean power down coming off the corner. Now this is one of the curbs that are maybe not so friendly here because it is not at the same elevation as the track. So if you do get your right side tires on the curb exiting turn 5, just understand that it might try to pull the car off to the right just a little bit, and be prepared for that. All right, so we're coming up on halfway through the lap and we're starting to hit the big boy corners. Turn number 6 is one of the most intimidating corners on this track, and it's really a make or break corner on the lap as well because you're climbing uphill into it and then you're climbing significantly uphill out of it. So you got to get a good run through it, losing as minimal speed as possible. Having tracked out from turn 5 all the way on the right side up the hill, there's another bridge here that we can use as a reference point. And the biggest problem that I think people have with turn 6 is anticipation, because you know it's coming, you know you're going uphill, but you can't see it until you've passed underneath this bridge, even past the bridge, until the turn-in point is really when you can see the corner. So there is a bit of muscle memory and some repetition that will go into learning turn 6. But as I come up on the corner, in everything I've driven and experienced here at Laguna Seca, you can brake around the bridge, and you want to get your braking done before you turn in and balance the car through the corner with your throttle. It's very similar to turn 4 in a way where you want to get your braking done and float your speed. Here at turn 6, you're also going to want to get your braking done and rebalance the car so that you don't have any sort of extra rotation, any sort of extra dynamics going on here because this corner is so fast and so high risk. So on entry, light brake pressure, get it done in a straight line, come off the brakes, and as you turn in, what I'm looking for as I'm passing under this bridge is this yellow anti-cut curb on the inside. You want to use all the painted curb, you don't want to hit the anti-cut curb that's yellow, but if you can be looking for that yellow point as you cross under the bridge and into turn 6, that is what your reference point is, and as soon as you see it is basically your turn-in point. As soon as you turn in, you should also be starting to balance the car with the throttle, either maintenance throttle or even just start accelerating. And there's a big compression that happens with a lot of camber and a lot of elevation change here at the apex of turn 6. And as the car compresses, it's going to gain a ton of grip. And that's your point to get hard into the throttle, and you can even add a little bit of steering input to finish off the corner and get yourself going up towards the corkscrew. If you've overcarried your entry speed or turned in too late, that compression will not affect the car nearly as much. So it's important to turn in and really tuck the car into that pocket right up next to the anti-cut curb as you come through turn 6. Lastly, as you finish turn 6, a couple of years back, they added a bunch of extra curbing here on the outside. You're going to want to use every inch of that you can. And the extra car width or so that they added is really helpful as you're coming off of turn 6. Rather than pinching the car, you can really let it float all the way out. But keep in mind, as you finish the corner, all of that grip that you gained here at the apex is going to go away as the camber goes away as well. So the car will float to the outside very, very quickly. Right across here is where all that curbing is. Use all of that and then cross the car back to the left, just kind of continuing that trajectory off to the left up this hill. So now we're headed very much uphill. You're going to be looking just at bright blue sky off in the distance, but you want to have the car off to the left side. And a little cheat code through here to make sure you have your placement right is a bridge right here that they will often put advertising banners on for big races, but otherwise it kind of sits empty, and there are 4 cross structures to it. Kind of from left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you place the car underneath the second one, you will be perfectly placed over that blind crest. So just kind of maybe on your out lap or your first couple laps, look for those vertical pieces on that gantry, and you'll be able to place the car nicely up against the curb that starts right about here, up into turn 7 and the corkscrew. Now turn 7, obviously not much of a corner, but it is very instrumental to the corkscrew in that it is the braking zone as we cross over the uphill into the crest for the corkscrew, which we'll get to in a second. But the goal is to cross diagonally from the left side of the track to the right side of the track to make this braking zone as straight as possible as you crest over turn 7 before you get to the corkscrew. Most cars will brake somewhere between those 2 curbs. Again, the first curb ends here on your left and the second curb starts about here on your right. So as long as you're kind of picking your braking point in those and aiming diagonally from one to the other, you should be placed pretty well getting up into the corkscrew. And for especially faster cars, this is almost a 2-stage braking zone where you're going to want to do the first bit of your braking nice and aggressively before you hit this crest. Right about here is where the elevation levels out and you crest over. You might need to relieve the brake pressure just a little bit to keep the car composed and make sure you're not either engaging ABS or locking a tire up if you don't have ABS before you can get back hard on the brakes and finish your braking zone here for the corkscrew. So once you've crested here at turn 7, you're going to be able to see the entry to the corkscrew, but it is going to come up very quickly. And essentially from the crest of the corkscrew, you can almost drive directly at the apex for turn 8, which is the top of the corkscrew. If you hang out to the outside, there's actually less camber and less grip, so you're going to have to turn in sharper. But really, it all crosses so fast, you can kind of just cross straight to the apex and feed the wheel slowly down and use a bunch of this camber that happens here at the top of the corkscrew to kind of hook the car around and get you into the second half of the corkscrew. So don't focus so much on staying wide and turning in late as so much as just braking in a straight line and getting the car down into that little pocket right at the curb here for turn 8. Now there is a little bit of a trick coming through the corkscrew, and as you get more experience here at Laguna Seca, obviously everybody shows up knowing the corkscrew, but you'll figure out that there's really not a lot going on here other than figuring out where to aim the car and then just getting through it. The speed is made in many other sections on this track, so yes, it's iconic, but no, it doesn't make or break your lap. The trick is on the left side of the track here, there are about 3 trees, 1, 2, 3. From your left, that third tree is where you want to aim the car. Should be right around here, and a lot of times the schools that teach here will have either a ratchet strap or a cone or something on that tree to kind of identify it, because everyone at the track knows that trick once you've been here a couple times. So as you're coming across that apex right here, get your nose or your eyes and the car's nose aimed right at that third tree, and as long as you kind of get it aimed and straighten the wheel, you'll just drop straight, enjoy the drop, and then get on power as you compress through turn 8A. So whether that tree helps you or not, you'll basically just straighten the wheel up and fall over the hill. Now you will have a moment where the car goes straight, and then as soon as the car compresses at the bottom of the corkscrew is when you want to turn your hands back to the right, get aggressively on power, and hustle the car downhill, because this next section is really the event of Laguna Seca. It's the most fun. So now that we've dropped through the corkscrew, things are going to come at you really fast because the rest of the track is essentially downhill. So coming out of 8A, exiting the corkscrew, you can get really hard on power. This is a great acceleration zone, but as you can see, it's kind of a decreasing radius corner that drops significantly downhill, almost 7 stories just alone in turn 9. So right around here is our bridge. That's going to be a little bit of a reference point. You can use as much space as you want coming off of the corkscrew, but often most cars won't need to come all the way out to the left. From the time you get on power, you're basically trying to get the car off to the right as much as you possibly can without overexerting the car too much before turn 9. So ideally you want to get the car at least mid-track as you cross underneath this pedestrian bridge. Once you've gotten to the middle of the track though, the slower your car is, the more you might be able to get out to that outside. But keep in mind that the camber is such that you have more of the track working for you the tighter you go. So the faster your car is, the tighter you can run this. You can actually cut quite a bit of distance out of the entry of turn 9. And then the significant elevation change happens right towards the end of the corner. You can kind of use that elevation to fix whatever happened up here and really gain a bunch of grip down here. So again, crossing underneath this pedestrian bridge mid-track, starting to gradually turn the car in, and there's not really a braking zone or turn-in point for turn 9. It's essentially just kind of balancing your speed, having done as much acceleration as you feel you can, with a little bit of brake, maybe a little bit of maintenance throttle, kind of playing with both of those to just keep your momentum rolling. And then right around here, you're going to drop heavily down into the apex of turn 9. And all you're looking for is, again, one of these big yellow anti-cut curbs. You want to tuck the left side of the car right up against it and use the elevation to kind of hook the car through the last bit of corner. You're going to feel a huge amount of grip gained here at turn 9, very similar to the amount of grip you gained at turn 6. If you take any moment of breather in between turns 9 and 10, you're immediately behind for turn 10, and you'll see what I mean in the video. It happens very fast. So just as quick as the car gains grip here at the apex of turn 9, it goes away because the track starts to level out. You're going to want to carry that corner off to the right side, from the right side to the left, and there are a couple of good reference points here for turn 10. The first is an alternate pit entry that goes off right about here. As soon as you cross that access road for that alternate pit entry, then you have a couple of brake markers. Most cars can't brake much later than that access road. So you're actually going to get your braking done lightly and early, and turning in pretty early as well to use the rest of the elevation to complete turn 10. If you try to hang wide and then drop in, it doesn't allow you to carry the same momentum. So don't hesitate to turn in a little earlier than you think and really fall into turn 10. Now there's a massive amount of camber that you'll see in the video that really helps sling the car through this corner. But you don't have any of it on entry and you don't have any of it on exit. So you've got to kind of turn in early, anticipating that the grip is going to gain as you go through the corner. Again, right down to the curbs, using the curbs if you can, and then tracking about to the left as you come out of turn 10. Now exiting turn 10 is the other curb you've got to be a little bit careful with, because the track has a lot of camber on the exit, but the curb is flat. So if you get your left side tires out to the curb, it can make the car want to come off to the left side of the track here or fall off the track entirely. But as long as you know to anticipate it, maybe straighten your hands up as you get to it and just kind of let the car float, you'll be okay. Now just one corner to go, and it is the slowest corner on the track, and you've got all this downhill momentum spitting you into this heavy braking zone for turn 11. And the key here is just don't throw away the rest of your lap. You've really got a pretty basic corner. It's just a fairly early brake on the right side of the track, and then a pretty basic apex onto the front straightaway. So there's nothing real complex about this corner other than you've got a lot of momentum and a lot of gravity helping you get into it faster than you want to be going. So after you come off turn 10, get the car over to the right. Most cars will have to brake at the 3 board, maybe into the 2 board a little bit, but you'll have the reference points 3, 2, 1. And the only nuance to turn 11 I find is there's a little bit of a drop right at the apex that the car will kind of fall over. And as long as you get the car hooked up and turned in before you hit that drop, the front axle will cross the drop, you'll gain a bunch of steering grip, and you can power off the corner, whether it's a front or rear wheel drive car. But if you have the front end pushing or understeering before you get to that drop, then you've kind of hung yourself for the corner, and all you can do is get your eyes up to the start-finish stand and just try to finish off that corner as best you can. But as you can see, there is a pretty significant amount of this front straightaway that counts to the lap before you hit the timing beam. So if you're on a timed lap or you're on any sort of competition, the goal for turn 11 is clean braking, late apex, get off the corner, and get to the start-finish line as quick as you can. So there's a lap of Laguna Seca. It's a lot of fun. Now let's take a look at what it looks like in the car. So we're hopping on board at Laguna Seca in a 2017 Honda Civic Si. It's front-wheel drive. It's on kind of a 100 treadwear tire equivalent, so not a ton of grip, but it does have decent racing suspension, a little bit beefier brakes. In general, very much a street car, not that fast, nothing fancy. We'll take it for a lap. So coming up to the start finish line, you can see here already what that uphill elevation looks like. I try to get close to this wall and just kind of keep the car on the left, but that crest is where you want to be careful if the car's a little bit faster. Now we'll start to cross off to the right, braking pretty early. You see how downhill it is, and then aiming the car towards that first apex. This front wheel drive car wasn't super happy with pivoting in the middle of the corner, so you saw me cut a bunch of distance, but you can let the car wash out in the middle a little bit more before getting all the way over to the left. And there's that early turn in up to the anti-cut curb that you get nice and close to, using all the curb on exit for turn 3, even using some entry curb on turn 4 before cutting down, using all the curb on the right side and then all the curb on the left again. You can see lots of momentum through there before we cross over to the right side underneath the bridge. It's a good braking reference point to start with, and turning in pretty early, see the camber gain, and it just kind of catches the car. It looked like it was going to understeer, and then it just hooked up. That's what we're looking for. Now headed significantly uphill, and try not to anticipate turn 6 too much. We're going to do our braking in a straight line, and then back to power right here as you compress. You saw me add a little bit of steering wheel as well. That helps complete the corner. Steering off into bright blue sky, there's the gantry. We're crossing underneath the second from the left. Getting our braking done diagonally from the curb on the left to the curb on the right, and aiming straight towards that compression at the apex of the corkscrew, dropping straight down. And then you're going to see me get as far to the right as I can before just kind of balancing the car, slowly bringing it down to that big compression there at the apex of turn 9, hustling it back. There's that access road, braking early, turning in early, and using the elevation to my advantage before I track all the way back out, hustling to the right, and then once again braking early, just trying not to throw away the work I've done on this lap. There's that little bit of a dip, and then you can get hard on power, accelerating back towards the start-finish line. Make sure you adjust your mirrors for speed. So now we're hopping on board for a lap of Laguna Seca, and this is in a very fast car for the space available here, I would say. It's a Honda Civic TCR car, about 300 horsepower, lots of downforce, big racing slicks. It's a proper race car, so it carries more momentum really well. So the difference between the Civic Si and this Civic TCR car is about 10 seconds in lap time, and you'll be able to see the difference that makes in how much faster things come at you here at Laguna Seca. So coming up to start finish here and crossing under, you can see how much elevation there is. And you want to make sure that you let the car float over this crest off to the right side before getting hard on the brakes for turn 2, the Andretti hairpin. You can see me kind of angled down for that first apex, let the car wash out just a little bit, and then tuck down to the second apex as well before tracking off using all the curb and getting the car over to the left for turn 3 as early as possible. Fairly light brake pressure, turning in pretty early, and just kind of letting the car roll through before using all the exit curb, and even using some entry curb here at turn 4. Again, lots of momentum through here onto the second longest straight on the track. So we're going to gently bring the car from the left to the right, get parallel with the curb on your right, and get your braking done pretty early, flowing speed and using this camber gain right there. That's what you want to use to get some speed and put your power down. Should say carry speed before coming uphill to turn 6. Blind on entry, get your braking done before you turn in, balance the car already on power, and adding a little bit of steering wheel through that big compression. You also saw that exit curbing before headed up towards turn 7 in the corkscrew. Now we're going to draw a diagonal line between that curb and this curb and aimed straight at the apex of the corkscrew right there, falling straight over and then getting not too much off to the right side of the track. You saw me basically center track there, and then bringing the car down using this compression here to catch any bout of grip that we need, and then getting off to the left. You see how fast this comes at you, throwing it in for turn 10, using all the curb on exit, and then hustling the car over to the right for one more corner, turn 11, braking early, turning in, trying not to overslow the corner, or overshoot the corner, I should say, and then tracking all the way out. So those are my tips for Laguna Seca. Now let's get into the scores, and first off we have our fun factor, the most important in my opinion. I'm going to give it a 7 for fun factor, and bumping that up just a little bit from a 6, I would say, because of how iconic this track is. It's obviously a blast to just go there, be there, soak in the history, drop down the corkscrew. That's all a ton of fun, but in general I kind of think of this track as half fun, half waiting to have fun again, and by that I mean the first half of the lap is not necessarily the most fun. A lot of those flat terrain corners, you're just kind of waiting to get back to the fun stuff here in the corkscrew, dropping back down the hill towards the last corner. All of that is a blast, but you do kind of have to wait to get back to it sometimes. Next up we have our risk factor. I'm going to give that a 6. Because this track is kind of surrounded entirely by a gravel trap, so you kind of really have to go off big to end up touching something. But in general, it's kind of hard to make big mistakes here at Laguna Seca. The track is not that fast in the first place. There's a couple of spots that you do have to be pretty careful, and if you do drop just a little bit of a tire onto a curb or the dirt, you can get yourself in some trouble, but this track is not a hugely risky one. And then we have our technicality. How hard is the track to execute a lap? And I'm also going to give this one a 6 because this track keeps you very busy, especially in a faster car. You don't have a lot of time to plan ahead or reset, I should say, when you get in between, for example, turns 9 and 10 or 10 and 11. Things are coming at you really, really quickly. So you got to be ahead of the car, be willing to hustle the car quite a bit. But in general, I don't know that there's a corner in here that if you showed up to the track and you saw it, you would just be like, I don't know where to go. It's pretty easy to read, but it's a little bit difficult to execute. So my overall score for Laguna Seca is going to be a 7. It is absolutely an iconic track and it deserves to be. I would say in my general, all of the tracks I've driven, it doesn't quite make my top 5. There are certainly more fun tracks, but it is a total blast. You're going to enjoy it no matter what and enjoy driving one of the most iconic tracks in the world. So that does it for my track tips for Laguna Seca. If you're headed here or any other track, we do have coaching packages available, everything from remote coaching to private coaching at the track and a whole lot more here at ASM. But otherwise, I hope you found that helpful and thanks for watching.